today I wanted to do something quite a bit different than I've done before. I wanted to do a sort of book roundup video and sort of give you quick reviews of the books that I've read over the past 3 months. I think that ideally I would like to do these videos once every 3 months, so like quarterly. So this would obviously be the first one, and I'm going to do the books that I've read from July through September. And yeah, so I thought it'd be cool to share my books that I've read and my reviews, just because I read a lot of books. Like in the past 4 months or 3 months, I've read 12 books. So yeah, I thought it'd be cool to share those with you. I only have 4 of them with me today, but for anything that I don't have, because a lot of the books that I read I take out of the library, I will insert a photo like here-ish. And also all of the books will be linked down below to their Goodreads page if you want to read more about them. So I'm just going to go in the order that I read them. So the first book I read was The One by Kira Cass, which is the final book in the Selection trilogy. So if you've never heard of them, I would start at the beginning. But I really love this trilogy. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic dystopia for teens with like the Bachelor show mixed in, which sounds kind of cheesy and I wasn't expecting too much from it. But they're actually really cool. They're completely different from most dystopian books because of the sort of Bachelor TV show element. And basically the society is ordered from the ones, and each number below that is like a lower class, and each one has to stay within their certain job ranks, and they have colors they have to wear or can only wear, and basically there's no way to move up. But the tradition in this country is that when the prince comes of age to marry and to take the throne, they basically hold like a lottery, and all of the girls who want to possibly win the ability to become the prince's wife and later queen can enter, and anyone from any rank can enter, and they become a 1. And if they are selected, they and their family become 3s, which is like pretty awesome. Or was it 2s? Whatever. But they become like high class no matter where they're from. If they're like 6s, if they're bottom of the food chain, which I think is 7, they are elevated and they get more money and they are just in a better station. But if they win, they become a 1, which is just like the best gift ever. Of course, the downside is that they have to marry this prince no matter who he is. So our protagonist obviously is one of the girls who enters. Originally, she doesn't want to enter because she has a boyfriend and she's just not interested. But she does enter basically for the money and for her family. And not really a spoiler because I'm pretty sure it's on the back of the first book. But of course, this is how the relationship between her and her boyfriend sort of breaks apart, and how she grows some kind of relationship with the prince. So it's 3 books. There are also 2 or 3 like novella things for outside characters, which I think are only ebooks, but they are going to print them in a separate book, so I'm really excited to read those when they eventually come out. I thought that The One was a very good ending, and I was very pleased with it, and it ended the way I wanted it to, so I was quite happy with that trilogy. Also, I would really like to own both The One and The Elite, which are book 2 and book 3, because I own the Selection, but I don't have the other 2. So while I don't have that one, I want it. The next book I read was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I actually wasn't really interested in reading this one, but my best friend was like in love with it and she said I had to. So I did. And basically the idea is that the main character is one of a set of twins. Their names are Kath and Ren. So yeah, basically the main character is the nerdy twin, and she writes Simon Snow fan fiction, which is basically kind of like Harry Potter fan fiction. Throughout the book too, there are, I think at the beginning of every chapter, there's like a snippet of fan fiction that either she wrote or someone else wrote, as well as sort of fictional clips from the Simon Snow books. So that's kind of cool. Basically, the book starts when the twins are going to college. Ren wanted to sort of start new in college, so she suggested that they get separate rooms, separate roommates, and Kath, being very antisocial, has a hard time with her roommate, and shenanigans ensue. It's a really funny book. It's really cute, and I just didn't want it to end. I was just like, I just want so much more of that story. I don't want to tell you too much more about what I found adorable about it, just because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything for you. But I would definitely recommend that. That was one of the better teen books I've ever read, if you like sort of teen romance-y fiction. And then the next book I read, which I actually started rereading probably about 2 years ago, but I kept reading like school books and just other books I had at the library. But I was rereading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I can't even count the number of times that I've read this series over and over again. I started going through them about 2012, and I stopped somewhere in the middle of book 4. So I recently finished reading that, I think in July. I'm a massive Harry Potter fan. I love these books to death. This one's not my favorite, of course, but you have to read them all if you're going to read them. So if you've never read Harry Potter, then do it. If you have read Harry Potter, I'm sure you love it, or else we probably can't be friends. Sorry. Just while I'm on the topic, I did also reread book 5. I've stopped there for now. I'm sure I'll go back and finished book 6 and book 7 just because they're my favorite parts of the series, but I did reread book 5. This book's a bit of a roller coaster for me because sometimes I hate Harry for being such a whiner, and sometimes it's like I get it and I really appreciate Rowling's ability to make me hate Harry like that. So yeah, book 5 is definitely a good one. The story is really good. I also finally read the last John Green book I had to read, which is Abundance of Catherines, which is just not showing up. There we go, that's better. Yeah, so I've read the other 3, which are The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, and Looking for Alaska, all of which I loved, especially The Fault in Our Stars. But I hadn't read this one yet, which is weird because this is only the second one I own, but I tend to be really bad at reading books I buy. But yeah, I loved this one. It's probably second or tied for second favorite of my John Green books. As I said, The Fault in Our Stars is my favorite, but this one, or possibly this one tied with Looking for Alaska, is my second favorite. This one's about a sort of slightly socially awkward genius, or not genius, like child prodigy who has a weird thing about dating girls named Catherine. As you can see on the back, he's dated 19 Catherines by the time we get to this book, and this story sort of tells us a little bit of the story about each one while also telling us about one year he spends going on a road trip with his best friend to some like backwoods country like town, and his sort of shenanigans there, and he does a lot of growing throughout that story. And yeah, it's really weird and really interesting. And also, one thing that I loved about this book is that it has footnotes. Oh, focus. It has footnotes. Like, how ridiculous is that? So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I love John Green and I think he's amazing. So excellent book, definitely recommend. Another one I read that I don't own, unfortunately, but which I would really like to purchase is the For a Divergent collection by Veronica Roth. It's just a collection of clips out of the Divergent books, or I think just the first Divergent book, and some backstory on For, or Tobias. If you've read and loved the Divergent trilogy, it's really cool to get some more insight into who For is as a person and who he was before we ever meet him in Divergent. So yeah, because Tobias is especially my favorite character in these books, I really, really loved that book. So that was awesome. The next 3 books I read were a trilogy by Gabriella Pierce. I actually picked them up just because the name kind of amused me. The first book is called 666 Park Avenue, and it's about like witches on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So I thought that was fascinating. But I was very sad when I got to the end of the book only to realize that it was a trilogy and that there was no ending. I picked it up because it was like this big and I thought I would get through it quickly, but yeah, there were 3 books, so it was more like one story this big. The second book was called The Dark Glamour, and the third was The Lost Soul. Also, according to like the cover of the last book, these books have been made into a TV series on, I think, ABC called 666 Park Avenue. Personally, I don't think there's enough in the books to turn them into a series, but if you've seen it, let me know down below if it was any good or if it was as corny as it sounds. Yeah, as I said, there's not like a ton to explore in these books, but I did think that they were a fun, easy, slightly cheesy kind of read. But Gabriella Pierce did sort of develop the magic system that she used quite well, and the world of witches and witchcraft was pretty interestingly like developed and discussed. So yeah, that was a really cool story, I think, to explore. I'm not sure I would have picked it up if I'd known it was a trilogy, but it was really good, and in the end it's less than 1,000 pages and it's very quick paced. So if you're interested in like witches and like modern magic-y fantasy books, I think I would recommend it actually. The 10th book that I read the past 3 months was The Beginning of Everything by Robin Schneider. Obviously, I went back to the teen fiction books. I love teen fiction just because it's easy to read, it's quick, it's cute, and I don't know, it's just easy to read and really good. Whereas I find that these sort of easy to read, cheaper, tackier books written for adults are just that. They feel cheaper, they feel tackier in general, and they sort of tend towards romancy chick lit, whereas there's just something more enjoyable about the teen books. I don't know, maybe that's just me, maybe not. I know that a large majority of BookTube in particular loves their YA fiction, so it's probably not just me. Anyway, I read The Beginning of Everything by Robin Schneider, which is a really weird book. It's about this popular guy who gets into a car accident which like totally wrecks his leg, so he can't do tennis anymore, and how that affects his like last year in high school. And he's not popular anymore, he's with a completely different crowd, and this character's theory has always been that there is a moment in everyone's lives that's like a turning point when your life begins. And so his life begins with his car accident. And so that is where the story sort of begins. Basically, he goes through a ton of growth and change through his last year, and it's really, really interesting. I found it really enjoyable, if not particularly quotable. Next was a book I read mostly because of the Vlogbrothers, who are John Green and his brother Hank, if you don't watch or know about them. But they've mentioned this book a couple of times as a book which I believe was written by their friend, or they know the author, Jennifer E. Smith. It's called The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight, which is like a name about this long. It took me forever to memorize it. But yeah, the book was really, really good. It's basically about these two people who meet through a chance meeting in an airport and just also happen to later have seats beside each other on the same plane, and what happens after. And then finally is another book I have. I apologize for the disgustingly ugly cover. My friend actually bought this one in a used bookstore and then later bought the first 4 books in a box set. So she has a nice pretty cover of A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. If you don't know, this is the second book in the Game of Thrones series. As you can see, it's massive. It is almost exactly 1,000 pages long. I love these books so much. If you love the show, I would definitely recommend reading these. They are huge and they are a big endeavor, but they give you a ton more backstory and more information about some of the characters sometimes that you don't see very often, or you get to see through the characters' eyes instead of through the camera lens, where you're just sort of watching the characters. You can't get inside their heads. The book is written a lot more sort of omnisciently, so you can see inside their heads, and that's really, really, really cool, especially for like your favorite characters. There are also characters after reading the first 2 books that I don't hate quite as much as I used to hate. So that's really cool. There are, of course, some differences between the TV show and the books. Sometimes things aren't fully developed in the TV show, sometimes they're cut out completely or simplified. Personally, that doesn't make me too angry just because I understand that they are going to have to edit things down to fit it into about 10 hours a season. Like this in 10 hours, that's pretty impressive. That's why the 4th and 3rd seasons of the show were actually just one book. That book's about 1,200 pages, I think. So they took 20 hours to do that book. Again, not like, I'm not going to complain about that. But yeah, so I love that there's actually extra things in these books. I love that they're different because it makes the reading of them a lot more enjoyable. I think if they were word for word, I wouldn't be able to get through the books. So yeah, if you are a fantasy fan, if you're a Tolkien fan, or if you're just a fan of the Game of Thrones series, read these. They're great. I'm currently working on the 3rd book, which is A Storm of Swords. So that'll, of course, be in my next book video. And that's all for this past sort of summer quarter, I guess. Let me know down below what books you've read and really enjoyed recently. I'd love to get some more recommendations. I will also have a link to my Goodreads and, of course, all of the books that I mentioned here down below. I hope that you enjoyed this different video break from some of the makeup-y stuff, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up so I know that I should keep doing them because you're loving them as much as I am. I love to hear from my beauty vloggers. I know Anya and Elle and Ingrid all talk about books. I'm sure there are tons others, but those are just the first 3 that come to mind. So yes, let me know what you've been reading. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!